Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar titled Supply Chain Disruptions Lessons in Building Resilience and Smart Planning, organized by Anamind. Today, we are here to share good insights, deep insights that are going to help us to see what the Africa supply chain is like right now in this turbulent season. A little bit about Anamind, a little bit about Anamind before we move forward. We are an award-winning supply chain solutions provider and advanced planning solutions provider. We offer robust supply chain operation and analytics. We are not just taking people through a number crunching exercise, but offering sustainable solutions that will actually be seen as long lasting in the business. Our key competencies are around building proper business planning capability, working with customers across various sectors, across various geographies, in multiple revenue sizes, offering a wide range of experience. Our approach is consultative. We do partner with our clients, not just to resell a solution, but to also offer lasting support in the planning area. We have won several awards across industry as a promising brand, providing solutions in both planning, logistics, and supply chain capability and tech. We have been seen as a top demand solutions provider, demand planning, and demand focusing solutions provider. And we also are a leading management consulting firm and a startup. Some of the offerings that we have, of course, are around planning systems, obviously, supporting demand and supply planning, inventory optimization, production planning and scheduling. We also offer planning as a service, meaning as opposed to hiring and setting up an entire team, we come in as a team that will work together with you. This is fast in setup. We have our own resources, AI systems. You don't need to invest too much capex in it, and literally very IT setup required. We also offer planning intelligence. We do set you up with good real-time reports, a self-service system where you can go in and download these up-to-date reports that give you a good snapshot, both in a snapshot and a detailed view of your business in whatever area you'd want to look at. We also set up workshops and meetings such as this, where we look at system issues, we look at quantitative techniques, we also offer best practice and hands-on teaching, training, and learning across the system. A brief introduction for this webinar. One of our objectives, of course, is to understand how organizations in Africa are adapting to continuous supply chain disruptions. We know there's a lot of changes going on across the world right now. There's a war happening. There are various sanctions issued by various governments. We have suppliers across the world. And the word resilience literally means the ability to bounce back. So how are supply chain systems bouncing back from difficult situations? The experts we have on today are going to share practical strategies on building this resilience, digitization. Everybody's talking about AI, everybody's talking about smart planning. So what have they done in their industry and in their expertise to bring this to life? Cross-country, cross-industry dialogue, because our experts have worked across industry, across various countries, and they know how to adapt to cross-border, cross-continent challenges, cross-government, cross-regulation challenges that they have faced, and they're going to be sharing insights that will help us in these areas. A brief introduction of our panelists. Our first panelist is Mr. Kaushal Maharaj. Kaushal has over 24 years experience in supply chain. Building on his foundational manufacturing experience, he successfully led various operations within Sasol over 13 years period. He's led a full end-to-end supply chain in chemical, water, hygiene, and food industries over the past 10 years. He's built and set up very competent teams, designing supply chain systems to operate within across the continent, and he is an absolute person, no stranger to disruptions and building systems that can adapt to change quickly. Currently based at Cape Town and a lead consultant. The other one is Lyndon. Welcome to the panel, Lyndon. He's an accomplished procurement supply chain leader with deep expertise in strategy, risk management, business transformation. He's currently serving as a group procurement manager at Pepco Holdings and the building company. He brings on board to this panel today over 20 years experience driving operational excellence. He is a passionate advocate for responsible sourcing, community development, and has led very many impactful insights across different companies like Distel. Myself, I bring in a bit of wealth of experience for across 12 years in planning, demand planning, material planning, supply chain planning across S&OP, and I currently serve within Anamind as a senior consultant. Welcome, Lyndon. Welcome, Koshal.
Thank you very much. Melissa. Thank you very much. Good. You did not mention that Kushal and I also have crossed paths on many, many occasions in the supply chain as well. So we know of each other as well.
It's a small world. True. The good thing, it's a small world. The good thing about supply chain is that it is a link. We are quite interconnected. So right into our discussion, right into a discussion about resilience, the ability to bounce back, maybe this one fast. How has your organization, the various organizations that you've worked in, redefined supply chain resilience over the past 2 years? How are you bouncing back? How are you getting back on track?
Yeah, Felisa, thanks for that question. I think I'll take that. So if I talk about resilience over the last couple of years, it's become more of a discussion post-COVID when supply chains around the world were brought to their knees and literally crumbled in the face of various challenges in terms of sourcing, shipping, and being able to supply consumers. So that's really where supply chain professionals really started talking about resilience. And what's happened over the last couple of years, we've seen in various different industries and organizations that a primary focus really is about diversifying the supply base. So where, particularly in Africa, if we look at the African context, we have supply chains that rely very heavily on areas like China and Europe for sourcing. And leadership is realizing that they've got to really look at local supply networks and try and develop that. So nearshoring through partnering with suppliers, building relationships, and being able to develop suppliers to be able to supply. And then other critical areas, particularly again in Africa, South African context as well. From a manufacturing point of view, labor is as well, a volatile space. You need to be able to build resilience around that, and how industry is doing it is by looking at means like automation. So building in automation in the manufacturing space, we know that power is a vulnerable supply, in Africa, particularly in South Africa. So we see industry becoming more self-sufficient, investing in solar. But I think a key point I want to make around resilience is skills. You need to really build resilience by building skill in your supply chain teams. And when you build skill in your supply chain teams, you need to get your teams to be more aware of risk and to be thinking more about contingencies around risk, and also building skill around people being able to use analytics and data to be more proactive and rather than being reactive. But yeah, Velisa, I hope I've been able to summarize what we've seen in industry from a resilience point of view. Thanks.
You have touched on major things. You've touched on partnering, supplier partnership, diversity, automation, skills being the biggest thing. If I bring this all together, ultimately supply chain is all about ensuring the operations don't stop. So bearing that in mind, what has been your biggest operational challenge? Maybe Lyndon had asked this to you. Given all these areas that Kaushal has helped us touch, where have you seen your biggest challenges in the last 12 months and all the disruptions happening?
Velisa, if I had to, I would say all the above, because I think reality is, these disruptions and challenges that Kushal mentioned and how you be resilient is not going away. It's constantly there, and the world is constantly changing, and there's new things. I think in terms of on Kushal's point around collaboration with your stakeholders, it's very, very important about understanding your stakeholder in your supply chain and how you develop risk mitigation and contingency planning for them. I think if we look at the disruptions at the moment within our biggest challenge in reality, which we faced from an Africa continent and South Africa continent, is just the global, I call it the global political landscape that is currently happening. South Africa and probably a lot in Africa relies a lot on international markets, which is impacting our logistics, and a big part of that is the cost of logistics and the cost of lead times of logistics, and then the import tariffs that we currently have around the country that is impacting. But it's also an opportunity for us to see how we can look at localizing and developing our local supply base as well. The issue around just looking at addressing power in South Africa, there's a big drive around trying to be self-sufficient on power in terms of solar, as likewise in African countries where you try and manage that, because the cost of power is ever increasing, and what are organizations doing in terms of to improve that as well. If I had to go and list my top three disruptions at the moment that I'm currently facing within our business, it's really around our partnering with the right suppliers, because we want to focus on your right supplier and your right stakeholder, and then also in terms of the logistics within our environment. And then lastly is specifically around, power and how extensively the tariffs are increasing year on year, double digits. And you have to start looking at, how do you reduce that to make it more, from a manufacturing perspective, more cost and self-sufficient as well.
Thank you so much, Lyndon. I mean, you've touched on some key areas. Power is an issue, logistics, partnering with the right people. But the biggest one that I want to look at is contingency planning. Supply chain is known for agility. Everybody speaks. Kaushal, can you hear me?
I lost you there, Velisa, sorry.
Sorry, no, so I was saying, in the light of contingency planning, okay. In the light of contingency planning, are we? So, in the light of contingency planning, are we reactive?
Yeah, Velisa, you were breaking up, but I think I got that question. Are you asking whether supply chains and whether from a contingency planning point of view, we are reactive?
Yes.
I think there's enough evidence, from what we've seen in industry from a personal point of view, and in a consulting role. Unfortunately, the answer is yes. I think too often than not, we see supply chains, and particularly from a planning point of view, being very reactive. And I think we got to ask ourselves why. It's not everyone's intention to just be reactive to every issue that arises, but it's about data, and it's about visibility. And I think the problem that many supply chains face is that when you talk about data, it's very siloed. A lot of planning teams are trying to do their best whilst working off Excel spreadsheets, for lack of integrated business processes and planning systems. And they end up, spending most of their day firefighting. And I'm sure, there might be people on the call that can relate to that. I think so. You don't want to be in a reactive space, so you got to be asking yourself the question. So, how do you better prepare yourself to be able to predict, for the various different scenarios, rather than being reactive? And again, I want to pick on a particular issue that I opened with from a resilience point of view. And I think it's about skills, in analytics and in inventory, or enhancing manufacturing capabilities, that might shorten your processing time. So, how do you navigate this question of how to become more proactive and become more bring predictability in? I think you've got to start with your supply chain strategy. You've got to build in your ability to be able to have the right kind of planning systems, to have real-time visibility, to be able to invest in the right kind of skills and that can perform the necessary analytics. So commit to it from a supply chain strategy point of view. Understand what it is that you want to invest in and build on, and then commit to that and execute in that space. But yes, right now, still very reactive. I think we're trying to do the best we can, but if you don't have the right tools, you're not going to be able to achieve predictability.
Very, very rightly said. Looking at firefighting that you have actually mentioned, remember when COVID happened, China coughed, everybody caught a cold. So now, with how reactive we actually are and how erratic raw material lead times are becoming, how are we incorporating safety and agility in planning? Lyndon, what's your view?
Yeah, Felisa, I think, it's two critical aspects within any business, any supply chain. One is sort of a predominant. You have to constantly look at efficiency in your supply chain. So that's almost your cornerstone of running your supply chains and ensuring that that you do your risk planning and your contingency planning and your stakeholder. But I think a big part of it is, if your supply chains don't have the capability to deal with agility, and then your supply chains are not going to be effective. And that focuses on, the world's changing. You talk about AI, you talk about tariffs, you talk about raw material shortages, you talk about price hikes, etc. How do you adapt, and how quick you can be able to adapt without impacting your end consumer as well? So your contingency planning is critical. Ability, if this happens, then that happens. You need to be able to deal with that. And that is all driven by, if you're not going to have, let's talk about in the FMCG space, if you're not going to have product, you can, don't even talk about the price. You're not going to even have a sale. It's not going to even be there. So how important agility becomes in your business is so critical. I talk from a bit of a background from my experience is that you know, when you had COVID coming in and we had to find a sanitizer, for example, everybody was saying, listen, how can I find sanitizer? The price wasn't an issue. It was availability. So that's in your supply chains. How do you actually deal with, you know, constant influx of challenges that are coming into and be able to say, listen, do I have the agility in my supply chain to deal with that as well? And that agility can be driven by skills development. It can be driven by local supply, a base, not to be depending on international markets. In a previous example, I've worked in FMCG, Tiger brands, etc. We're saying also we can produce locally, but we're looking offshore, and let's see how we can balance that if the market, if the rand dollar, if the exchange rate is increasing, how do we adapt to go and produce locally, etc. So that agility is so key in that. And now, even now, in your space of logistics, of how do you do it? Do you increase your safety stock levels and your planning levels? How do you bring that agility into your planning systems as well?
Thank you so much, Lyndon.
Yep. If I could just add to that, Lyndon, that's a great point. I think, sorry, Felisa, if I may, Lyndon, that's a great point. You know, you spoke about product availability in FMCG and in retail space. You know, availability is king, and we have platforms now, you know, through channels like e-commerce that give consumers so much of choice, and availability is same day, if not within the hour. You know, so if you don't have the product, you invariably ultimately going to be impacting on your brand loyalty. So yeah, availability so important, and you need agile supply chains to be able to ensure the products stay on the shelf.
Yeah, and I think that builds back into your planning, your inventory management. You know, agility is not just, you know, having alternative plans, but it's also building it into your planning matrix around it to say, listen, increase the lead times, increase the so how agility, your planning systems can also adapt to that as well.
Yeah. So picking up the two key points, capability, collaboration, adding agility, and now finessing our planning system. Do you think that retailers and suppliers have really improved their relationships since COVID, Lyndon? And now, bearing in mind, we've spoken to inventory, we can't go increasing everything along the line. So how do we maintain freshness? How do we maintain high accuracy without increasing our working capital?
I think, you know, if we look at post-COVID and, you know, everybody was really shocked and under crisis mode, etc., it gave us an opportunity to actually stretch our supply chains in that regard, because everything was impacted. Your supply chain was impacted, your availability was impacted as well. And again, me being in retail currently as well was very, very important, because we all were I almost call it in the struggle. It's about working closely with your suppliers around their lead times, collaborating with them, and ensuring that they understand your demand in terms of it increasing the lead times, increasing the stock levels, etc., building it into your planning tools as well, and also, far as possible, giving them an improved forecasting matrix that allows for whether it's an increased service, increased stock levels as well. I think another area that, you know, we felt with our suppliers was also looking at, and this is from a procurement perspective, not so about a supply chain perspective, but from a procurement perspective, we wanted to ensure that we had an alternative product at all times in as a backup supply, or 2 alternative sources. Where we had one alternative source of supply was a major risk for us. And that's what we sort of put in place, post-COVID. And the collaboration with us and our suppliers became much more strategic in that manner.
Thank you so much, Lyndon. So looking at lead times, improved forecasting matrix, and having alternate products, Kaushal, what's your view on maintaining freshness and accuracy within the system?
Yeah, I think what's crucial is, having visibility of real-time data across your value chain, and this visibility is being made possible because we're seeing a lot of retailers incorporating technology like RFID and barcoding on receipt of goods into their stores, through their managed value chain and cold chain. We're seeing the increasing use of very smart and affordable warehouse management solutions through the various distribution nodes, including DCs and at final store. So they're being implemented, and I think this is enhancing the ability to maintain that freshness across the chain. In Africa, let's bring it back home. In Africa, you still do have other challenges from an infrastructure point of view, from a warehouse and product integrity point of view. Maintaining cold chain and maintaining ideal storage conditions does deteriorate as you move into rural areas and what we refer to as peri-urban areas. So that is areas where a supply chain leader would need to give fair consideration to how you would be able to manage the infrastructure and the asset base to be able to maintain product integrity. But from a planning point of view, systems are there, they are available, they are being used and implemented more frequently. We're seeing that trend.
So given this kind of systems, though, I mean, looking at everything that a supply chain leader has to manage, there seems to be very many balls in the air. And data is the new SKU that we have. It doesn't sit in the warehouse, but it's a key SKU that we now have. So how is data going to help you drive better decision-making, better agility, collaboration across the chain? Kaushal.
I would like to answer that.
Yes, Lyndon.
Because we underestimate data. I think that is a key area that a lot of businesses think that they can just run on just day to day, if I could call it. If you're not getting the data, you're not going to be able to measure it, and you're not going to be able to make strategic decisions, and you're not going to be able to focus in terms of where your priorities are, if I could call it like that. And that can be, if it is in inventory management, it could be if it's in your supply chains, your lead times, etc., your deliveries, your customer sales, etc. Data, as you mentioned, is really becoming the new king, if I could call it like that. With that, you need the right tools available to accommodate that data. Data is just data if we cannot have the right partnerships that can interpret the data, if you don't have the right skills to interpret the data and understand what you are looking for. If we use inventory management as an example, data can actually save you money massively, and it can cost you money because you might be applying the data incorrectly as well. I think in another area where you're talking about just staff management, if you look at a simple example of time and attendance, you could actually be able to see people, how often people taking the 10-minute break, if I could call it, like in an inventory scenario, you could be seeing it, but how your biggest, you have a range of SKU products, but only 10% of that SKU product is contributing to 80% of the business. And then you start looking at how you can actually improve your inventory management and inventory stock holding, and you're serving your customer better based on your core items as well. So data is becoming so much critical in your business. And in our business, we have planning managers, etc., that'll be, and S&OP, sales and operations planning managers, that are so critical part of our supply chain, feeding information in, running scenarios, looking at forecasting. So that agility to plug in, if we do this, then this, if we do this, then this. And we find it quite it's a benefit for us when we're looking at our competitor landscape, etc. So data is so critical for us in our business, and how you have the right partners to align with that data and interpretation, not only just from a stock out perspective, but from a strategic perspective going forward within your business as well.
So it does sound like strategy really cannot run without data. So if you had the ability to digitize, I mean, we've all been on Excel. Excel was a digital tool we had at one time, and now everything is shifting into AI and all this big data, machine learning. So if you had to digitize one process tomorrow, which one would it be? Kushal, you can take that, then maybe Lyndon can add.
Yeah, before Kushal takes it, I will maybe just end off. I think for us,
You're quite passionate.
No, I think for us, and it's only because we're so embedded in it. And for me, when you look at your inventory management, the cost of inventory and the cost of holding inventory is a big part for us. So if you had to ask me in terms of our business right now, data management within my inventory stable is critical for me. Kushal, over to you.
Well said, Lyndon. If the question is from a digitization point of view, Felisa, one process. Yes. I think the fundamental process would be in planning. And I think there's so much power to be able to unleash with the technology that's being available, being available through smart and intelligent planning systems. So I would look at the forecasting, demand forecast to supply planning and material requirement planning processes. I would employ I would throw as much data as possible, as Lyndon alluded to, throw as much data as possible in there, get as much sources for demand as possible, and be able to work through the smart use of AI. Felisa, you spoke about it. So Lyndon said, he alluded to scenario planning, and that's the new wow. Within supply chain, it talks to building resilience. It talks to being more predictable, and being able to predict what's going to happen. You can only do that by modeling various different scenarios, and it's not something that a human being is going to be successfully achieving with an Excel spreadsheet. So that's where I would focus. And we've seen the results. I think, Felisa, you in that space, you've seen positive results from the point of view of demand forecasting, automated replenishment planning. So these AI-driven forecasting tools are really doing phenomenal benefit to supply chain planning teams. And that's where, for me, if it was one process, that's where I'd focus. Absolutely.
And you're absolutely right. I think one of the problems we face is we're in an era of too much information. It's always great just to be able to funnel and filter out noise from the data that we have and just get what it is that we need to see. And maybe, given your experience, both of you, Lyndon and Kushal, what advice would you give to a leader right now who's coming into supply chain, and to tell them, just focus on this particular area, because turbulent times are still coming. There are rumors of another COVID coming, ports are getting tricky, governments are getting edgy, disruptions in policy, there's a war happening, rumors of war. So what would you tell a new supply chain leader that this is how you're going to bounce back, given the experience that both of you have?
Well, the first thing I'd wonder is, what are you doing? Are you crazy? But to a youngster, a young man or lady getting into supply chain, aspiring for supply chain leadership, I think the one thing I'd want them to understand is that managing through disruptions is going to be an inherent part of your job. Okay, and how well you do your job the outcome will not necessarily be disruptions are going to disappear. How well you do your job will tell in how prepared you are for that disruption when it occurs. Okay, and I think what any new supply chain leader will need to realize is that they need to start investing and continue investing in two areas of particular interest, right? Number one is in skills. So hire the right people, have the right team around you, and continue investing in skills in that team and building competence in that team to be able to want to innovate, to accept digitization, and to have an analytical mindset, not be afraid of the data. We've spoken about that point a few times. So that would be my advice to any new supply chain leader. It's chaos, but how well you do your job will be, will determine how well prepared you are for that.
True that. Lyndon, what's your view?
No, I agree with Kushal. It's I think it's an exciting environment. I think one thing that I've learned is that within supply chain, you get a holistic view. It's a strategic role within the business. It's seen as a heartbeat of the business, and you have to have that resilience we spoke about, the agility, the continuous improvement mindset that you have, the risk and contingency planning analysis and contingency planning reviews that you have. I think you need to start embracing data, and you cannot do data. You're going to need systems to give you, and whether it's utilizing AI to incorporate and validate that data. There's also a big part around responsible sourcing and becoming a leader of choice. And then the world becomes so much smaller in terms of trying to get the competitiveness. So constantly test your supply chain, look for new opportunities, look at efficiencies, constantly not be complacent within your supply chain. And then very important is around the leadership. I think that skills as a supply chain leader is very important from a cross-functional influence up and down to your team as well. The disruptions will always be there. The risk mitigations or the contingency planning, the ability to run scenarios, the data planning, the data integration. Those are real things. To ask me if I had to give a person one advice, I would say, just understand, don't only focus maybe on procurement, focus on from cradle to grave kind of thing as well, end-to-end flow, understanding that and stretching that as well.
It sounds like change is the only constant in supply chain. You have to be able to adapt and predict and see what's coming ahead. Thank you so much, Kushal and Lyndon. Maybe we can quickly look at any questions that are coming in from the audience. Arish, do we have any questions coming in?
Yes, Melissa. So there is a question from Alok Rana. Alok Rana, I'll allow you to speak. You can ask your questions. So, okay. Just a minute. Yes. Now, yes, you can ask your questions, Alok. I've allowed you to ask a question. You can. You can unmute yourself, Alok, and ask the question. Yeah,
Okay, maybe. Can you hear me?
Okay,
So I
I'll
can
read
just
it out.
answer it out.
The question is in the chat box. Maybe you can read it out.
Yeah. So he's asking how can AI help us to resolve disruptions of supply chain in Africa, keeping in view the cost optimization and availability?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a part of that question, and Kushal can maybe add a part of that as well. I always love, AI is a great tool, but you need to feed it the right information as well. AI will not understand your supply chain if you don't feed that information. AI looks at global economics, etc. You're still going to have to take your supply chain and plug it into AI to sort of give you that. AI will give you a broad overview of, what are the recommendations. But if you had to use problem disruptions that you currently have, let's say, I've got too much inventory in my stock holding, what can I do, etc., to reduce my stock? It will give you what recommendations you're going to do, but you're still going to need systems, etc., to execute that. It does also give you a bit of recommendation on the disruption, but the implementation that you need is still going to be dependent on your ability to put things in place to address risk mitigation and also around giving you that sense of how do I test my risk mitigation or my contingency around it. So AI is great in terms of giving you that broad landscape, but if you don't plug your supply chain into it and feed it the right information, whether it is saying, this is my problem that I have, this is how I'm going to want to deal with it. And most cases will give you a recommendation, but there's also going to be need for systems. There's going to be need for you to do actually something to test it as well. And the discipline in doing that is key. And then obviously once you have that, then you can plug sort of dashboards in, and AI can give you all these various dashboards that you have. So have we started using it? Yes, I've started using it, taking my supply chain, taking my problem disruption areas, looking at it and saying, how do I feed it? What can I do differently if I've got this? And you have to constantly feed it in terms of it, and you will not get a 100% clear-cut answer out of AI. It seems as a broad perspective as well. AI doesn't know your product and your supply chain as well, and it's an enabler to manage the disruptions in your supply chain.
It sounds like AI is highly dependent on what you tell it. If you give it good data or good information, it's going to give you a good output. If you don't, you will have a bit of problem in the output that you get. But back to the question though, how do you handle the cost of launching or implementing AI and availability of it? This is assuming that everyone is generally connected in the supply chain.
When you say cost, what do you mean? Just to manage to reduce costs?
Cost of the tools.
Yeah, I think if I may, Lyndon, just comment on that. If people's vision of AI varies. Okay, AI to someone might mean robots moving autonomously through a factory or a warehouse space, etc. Where it could also, to somebody else, mean an enhancement in a planning tool that just allows you to be able to process more information in a faster time. Both examples of AI. One might be significantly more expensive than the other. So I think, and alluding to what Lyndon was trying to talk about, is the relevance of AI to your business and being able to manage that process. And AI is not going to make your critical decisions. AI is not going to represent you in a boardroom. If the decision was wrong or the decision was great, it's not going to replace leadership in supply chain. So you need to understand from a risk point of view where your greatest potential for loss lies, and whether AI can help mitigate some of that loss, where your greatest potential for an excellent customer experience might lie, and whether AI can enhance that, and so on and so on. And I can tell you that there are various value chains in Africa that have got AI already deployed that is working successfully in very small bits throughout the value chain. And you may already be experiencing it in products that you are using, in raw materials that you're currently buying, and some space in your supply chain. But I think a closing thought, if you will, on the whole topic of AI also is that this is a competitive space. Supply chain is a supporting function within a business. Supply chain is there to enhance the business, to sustain business growth, to make sure that customers are happy, that products conform to excellent quality and service, and so on. So it's a competitive race. And if your competitors are embracing AI, you better be thinking about it. Don't necessarily think of cost as a hurdle. Think about the potential benefit and the enablement thereafter. So it's a race. If you're not going to adopt you may not have been an early adopter, but if you're not going to get on now, a year down the line, it might be too late, and the gap might be too big. So just consider how you can enhance various different processes, how you can enhance your product offering, how you can make your customers happier by using AI in whatever way you could. There's plenty of literature about it. There's lots of case studies that you can easily get your hands on, and enjoy the journey. It can be quite an exciting journey. So yeah, embrace that.
True. I once saw a quote on Twitter that said, one of the costs we need to calculate is the future cost of your current decisions. So I think when it comes to AI and every single tool, we need to move away from just focusing on the sunk cost of getting it now versus the future benefit of what it is we're going to get. We do have a couple of questions. Let me read one for Vida, then maybe we can take the hand raised, Harish. So Vida is asking, based on experience, the new tools on demand planning have not really given us a predictable demand forecast that past can be used more accurately to forecast current fiscal year +2 based on the changes of macros. How do we bridge the gap? Forecast accuracy remains a big challenge, especially in FMCG. I think just to add to this question, maybe before the two of you take it, the bigger question I believe Vida is asking is about acts of God. How do you forecast for acts of God? Because things like COVID, things like typhoons, things like, the Suez Canal is blocked. Those are things that are called acts of God that are really outside the sphere of our visibility.
Yeah, Felisa, you're probably best positioned to answer a question like this. I mean, this is what you do every day, right?
Yeah. Vida, just to answer him, the first thing is that you have to do the traditional baseline. You have to look at your data and your history that goes into whatever tool. A tool is a tool, and it's a supporting thing to what is already available. If you feed the tool bad data, the output that you will get will obviously be bad. So that's the first thing. So first of all, let's look at the capability of the tool that you have. Whether it's a good tool in the first place. If you're just working with Excel, you are prone to errors, human error, which is something that we intend to eliminate by bringing in systems like Streamline that all are AI-based, The second thing is to look at the kind of data that you feed in, as much historical data that is clean as possible. You know, if you have things where a company dumped product into the market, you need to clean out that data and figure out what was a realistic sale at that particular point of time. If you had like a major out of stock because your supplier's plant burnt down, you need to have in some numbers that look like what would have been the numbers at this time if you were at normal view. So always ensure that the data that you put into your tool is as clean as possible. The third thing is there is a bit of human interference. Now, we expect intelligence to come in from marketing and sales. This is commercial intelligence. You need to ensure that when the tool gives you a number, you are not, again, twisting that number to fit human preference, right? Human intelligence is intelligence, but intelligence is usually based on historical experience, not necessarily any future outlook. So, for example, if you intend to carry out a promo, it's because you had a similar promo in a past time, and maybe you want to expand the demographics or obtain a particular objective. So minimize human interference into the sort of tool that you have. And then lastly, commercially speaking, we tend to align to the plan of our bosses. We do always want to have our optics right, you know, when we go to management. And demand planners are not necessarily optic managers. You have to be the person who bridges the gap between commercial, finance, sales, and manufacturing by telling people the truth. So if having worked with your tool on clean data, which is an effective tool, and reduced human interference, you get a view that is not necessarily favorable to the optics of the organization. Present it and then tell the people, this is what I'm seeing and this is where we should be. How do we bridge the gap? So then the gap becomes an opportunities and risk and assumptions conversation, and not necessarily a numbers conversation. Right? Lyndon, Kaushal, you want to add to that?
Yeah. Well said, Velisa.
No, I think that you've summed it up nicely, you know, with regard to, you know, the data set and, you know, forecasting. I guess you'll never get it 100% right, but you constantly strive towards that and utilizing the various systems and algorithms that AI can also provide you. So it's a constant strive towards that.
Yeah, like yes,
we have raising their hand.
Yes, so Alok, you have chance, you can unmute yourself and you can ask
Yeah,
your question.
thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you, Mr. Kaushal, Velisa, and Lyndon. It is a nice discussion and answer my question. I'm based at Nigeria and I'm leading supply chain for one agro commodity company. It is a multinational company. So my point was that regarding cost optimization, when we talk about Africa, first thing came in our mind is cost and affordability, either in terms of services or in terms of your final product. Yes, customer satisfaction is prime motto, but in that case, my services or my product should be affordable. I can't just add additional cost. So that was the reason. And in our case, our disruptions majorly are infrastructure, regulatory issues. There is even no power, security issues. So how to came out from this, being a leader? Because I heard some discussion was happening regarding if you are a new supply chain leader, what should you do? Can you please help me to understand a little bit?
Yeah, I think thanks for that question. I mean, just for the sake of time, I think for me, I think I've touched on it around cost. Coming as a seasoned procurement professional and, you know, being focused on cost and your supply chain, is constantly not being complacent, constantly looking at alternatives within efficiency, and then also in terms of product, and in terms of really, you know, whether it is raw materials or whether it is products that you are sourcing, constantly look for alternatives, and again, yes, cost is important, but, you know, linking it to quality and then linking it to the lead times as well. So yeah, so that's my response to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a challenging geography, Alok. I'm also aware of a few very, very successful businesses in Nigeria, and success is built on a lot of hard work there, you know, making sure that your generators are available 100% of the time, and they're filled with diesel, because that's a reality. You cannot maintain your supply chain unless you have power, and you're not in a position to rely on anyone else to provide that power for you. So very, very challenging environment. I have a lot of respect for you that you are willing to, want to know from the supply chain community on how to try and navigate through some of those problems. But yeah, your problems are uniquely African. And from my experience, we've managed in areas like Nigeria. It is challenging. Regulatory as well is challenging. The only advice is, it's still a growing economy, and if you look around, there's a lot of brands that have built very successful businesses, and it's on hard work, it's on toil. There's other aspects as well. I know that whilst the rest of the economy is continuing to grow there, look at opportunities like localized supply as opposed to importing. Scour the landscape, understand whether you can perform more local transactions on your raw materials or your incoming materials. To Lyndon's point, continually keeping that pencil sharp. It ticks many other boxes, doing business in Nigeria, sourcing locally, because you're feeding the communities within which you're operating your supply chain. So, those are the kind of successes that, make your job worthwhile, and talk to sustainability as well. But all the best, and thanks very much for joining the webinar.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alok, for your question. Given the challenging environment you're in, we could possibly invite you for the next webinar to just share how you are managing resilience in Nigeria. Sure. It's quite a challenging market, to be honest, given the environment. So I just want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. Thank you so much, Kaushal and Lyndon, for your experience, your insights. It's all about collaboration, agility, skill development, maximizing and taking up profit on everything that's happening in the market right now, like the AI that's new to us, and just seeing how we can bring this into our business and to build up supply chain capability. Even as Anamind, we are out to optimize all the tools available and offer this to our clients in the best way possible. If any attendee has any other question, I think we will take them offline. We will answer your questions via email. Please look at the email on the screen, send all your questions, any query you have, you can call the number and we will be able to answer you. The webinar will also be shared to your email. I just want to appreciate every single one of you for taking the time off. Please do share your insights, share your questions, share your queries, and we will definitely get back to you as soon as possible. If nothing else, I just want to say thank you. Have a good day, good morning, good evening. We will definitely be reaching out to everyone else after this webinar. Thank you so much, Kaushal. Thank you so much, Lyndon, and everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Okay, thank you very much.